On Saturday, May 3, 2025, an apparently normal afternoon turned into tragedy. 15-year-old Judith left her house after receiving a message, not knowing she was walking toward a date that would end in horror. Waiting for her on the other side was a 25-year-old man, consumed by jealousy and rage because she had decided to leave him and start a relationship with a boy her own age. In a lonely spot, far from any help, an argument escalated into the most brutal violence. In a matter of minutes, a teenager's refusal to resume a relationship sealed her fate and sparked a case that would shock all of Argentina. Stay until the end of this video to learn all the details of this terrible case. The case of Judith Gonzalez. Every day we live alongside evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is a latent presence in our society. In Criminal Investigators, we will delve into that dark side of humanity, bring the most perverse crimes to the screen, and try to get inside the minds of those beings who commit the most terrible acts. I'm Juan, and today I bring you another case. But before we begin, I want you to tell me where you're watching us from. We really like to know how far these stories reach. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share this video if you think someone else might be interested. And now, let's begin. Angelina Judith Gonzalez was born on September 3, 2009 in Pampa Blanca, a town in the El Carmen department, Jujuy province, in Argentina. Although her childhood was marked by hardships, she had a relatively happy childhood under the love and care of her mother, Evangelina Gonzalez, and her 8 siblings, who spoiled her and treated her like a princess. From an early age, she showed an inclination for artistic activities, especially music and dance. At age 5, she began attending a local academy where she studied belly dancing. Everyone described her as a quiet, kind, and respectful girl. Upon reaching adolescence, her commitment and love for dance were such that she began preparing to become a teacher and thus teach other children. But in addition to her love for music and dance, she was very studious, as her dream was to go into teaching. For her family, Judith was truly the soul of the house, as she filled every corner with joy with her dancing and games. Despite her young age, she used to accompany her mother to the town fair, where she sold used clothes to support her children. Evangelina's effort motivated her to want to work to help with household expenses. So she asked her to buy her a small sewing machine with which she started making hair accessories, which she sold to her classmates and neighbors. She also became interested in the world of beauty and personal care, so she dedicated herself to learning makeup and nail design, always with the support of Evangelina, who was willing to buy her a work table, lamps, and other necessary materials so she could practice. However, Judith's life took a definitive turn in 2023, when at the dance academy she met a local young man named Adrian Oscar Ochoa. At that time, she was 14 and he was 24. Despite the 10-year age difference between them and the fact that Judith was a minor, he began courting her, and in December of that year, they started dating. It is not clear if the young girl had her family's consent to be in a relationship, but it is known that they were together for several months. However, in October 2024, now 15, Judith decided to end the relationship with Adrian. The girl had grown tired of her boyfriend's jealousy and possessive, controlling attitudes. Apparently, Adrian did not take the breakup well and began harassing her to get her to agree to get back with him. He would approach her at academy classes, call her, and send her messages at all hours. But Judith was so determined to move on that she even started a relationship with another boy her own age. This infuriated Adrian, who threatened to beat up the boy and even tried to kidnap him. However, his erratic behavior was interpreted by Judith's loved ones as an obsession that would pass with time. They never imagined that this could represent a real danger to her, so they did not report him to the authorities. By early 2025, Judith went on with her life as normal. She continued her studies. She was already in her third year of high school and in her second year of training to be a belly dance teacher. In her free time, like any girl her age, she enjoyed spending time with her friends and sharing with her new boyfriend. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy that was coming and that the world the family knew until then would collapse. Saturday, May 3rd started like any other day at the family's home. While Evangelina and the older siblings went out to work, the others stayed busy with their own things. Around 2:30 in the afternoon, Judith received a message on her cell phone. She bathed, got dressed, and said goodbye to one of her sisters before leaving the house for an unknown destination. The afternoon passed normally, but at nightfall, when Evangelina arrived home, after an exhausting day at the fair, she was surprised to find that Judith had gone out several hours earlier and had not returned. She wasn't answering messages or calls either. With this, the anxious woman went out to the street to look for her. There she met her sister, Judith's aunt, who lived nearby. Seeing her agitation, she offered to accompany her to search the places where they thought the teenager might have gone. But from the very first moment, she thought Adrian had something to do with her daughter's sudden disappearance, so she went straight to his house to ask him. When she arrived at the place, she was met by the young man's parents, who distanced themselves from the situation and said their son was resting in his bed, sleeping, and told her to come in to convince herself that Judith was not there. When confronting Adrian, he told her that he hadn't spoken to or seen Judith in months. At Evangelina's insistence, his parents became aggressive, verbally abusing her and intimidating her by blocking her access to the exit. When she was finally able to leave that house, Evangelina went immediately to the police station to report her daughter's disappearance. From the very first moment, the woman told the officers that she suspected Adrian, as he had been bothering Judith for months after she ended the relationship. A search operation was immediately activated with local police officers, firefighters, tracking dogs, and the use of drones. The search covered farms, rivers, dams, and sugarcane fields, but they found no trace of the girl. Meanwhile, when questioned, Adrian said he knew nothing and repeated that he hadn't seen her for a long time. The authorities issued a missing person poster that was spread through social media, where internet users echoed Evangelina's desperate plea for help in locating her daughter. However, the case took a dramatic turn when on the morning of Sunday, May 4th, emergency services received a call from Adrian's house. An ambulance quickly arrived at the scene, and they transferred the young man to the nearest hospital, as he had ingested a rodent control pesticide in an effort to end his life. At the health center, they performed a gastric lavage and kept him sedated while he stabilized. However, because he was a suspect in the disappearance of his ex-girlfriend, they placed him under police custody, waiting for him to regain consciousness and be able to testify. That same night, Adrian broke down and confessed that he had taken Judith's life and had left her body half-buried in a remote, wooded area next to a river. Subsequently, the young man was transferred to the penitentiary service while work was launched to locate the place indicated by the alleged killer. That was how around 11 in the morning on Monday, May 5th, the Jujuy Province Police confirmed the discovery of the lifeless body of 15-year-old Angelina Judith Gonzalez. The body was located during the search operation near the river, on the border between Jujuy and Salta. It was next to a tree in an area of difficult access, partially covered with dirt and local brush, which was cordoned off to proceed with the removal of the body and for forensic experts to process the scene. Subsequently, the body was transferred to the judicial morgue, where the next day the routine forensic examinations would be performed. After the teenager's death was confirmed, the crime was classified as a possible femicide, So the prosecutor's office activated the special protocols corresponding to these cases. A prosecutor specializing in gender violence took charge of the investigation to confirm the cause and exact time of death, as well as to determine if there were others involved. Although the body had obvious signs of asphyxiation, such as compression marks on the neck, the authorities announced that they would wait for the preliminary results of the autopsy, as well as statements and any other evidence that emerged during the inquiries, to act in accordance with the law. The prosecutor indicated that the only suspect detained in the case would be summoned to a hearing where he would be formally informed of the charge and would have to appoint a defense attorney. However, on the very afternoon of the discovery, Judith's relatives, neighbors, teachers, classmates, and friends marched to demand justice, call for speed in the investigation, and denounce gender violence. Feminist organizations and collectives incorporated Judith's case into their records and statements, pointing to Jujuy as a province with serious indicators of gender violence. They highlighted that in less than a month, at least 3 femicides were registered in the province, which prompted, in addition to demonstrations of rejection, the demand for a declaration of emergency given the alarming increase in these crimes. As scheduled, on Tuesday, May 6th, the autopsy on the body was carried out. That same day, the prosecutor in charge of the case confirmed that the only person detained for the crime was 25-year-old Adrian Oscar Ochoa. The official reported that the subject would be charged with aggravated homicide due to the relationship and because gender violence was involved, a legal classification that carries severe penalties in Argentina. Likewise, she highlighted that the public prosecutor's office already had evidence supporting the accusation and would request the preventive detention of the detainee. The arraignment hearing took place on Wednesday, May 7th. There, the only person detained for the crime heard the prosecution's accusation and the evidence incriminating him. The gender violence court ordered preventive detention for 4 months. During that period, the prosecutor's office investigating the case had to gather all the evidence to take the case to an oral and public trial. After the hearing, the detainee was sent to prison, where he remained awaiting trial. On the afternoon of that same day, Judith's remains were transferred from the morgue to a local funeral home, where family and friends gathered to say goodbye to her. The burial was scheduled for Thursday, May 8th. On the day of the burial, at a press conference, the public prosecutor's office reported that the preliminary results of the forensic examination confirmed that Judith's cause of death was manual strangulation. This implied a traumatic death, as it means the attacker squeezed her neck to prevent her from breathing until taking her life. In addition, as the initial expert reports suggested, it was confirmed that the death occurred on the afternoon of that same Saturday, May 3rd, the day the young girl was last seen by her loved ones. Before we go on, let's take a quick break. If you're finding this video interesting, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. That helps us a lot to keep making more videos and telling these kinds of real stories. That said, now let's continue with the story. On the other hand, testimonies, cell phone analyses, and statements from close associates were collected to establish the link between the victim and the accused. Representatives of the prosecutor's office also indicated that the accused had no prior record or complaints of gender violence. Likewise, it was announced that the next step in the judicial process would be the formal presentation of evidence for the trial, a stage that must take place within the following 4 months, established for the preventive detention measure, that is, in September 2025. Meanwhile, on social media and local and national media, there was debate about the victim's young age and the generational difference with the alleged attacker, as well as the context of prior harassment as elements of questionable social practices and failures in prevention mechanisms. On September 5, 2025, as part of the investigation, the prosecutor's office in charge of the case requested to extend the preventive detention of the only person accused of the crime. The request aimed to continue and complete the collection of evidence before the start of the trial against the accused. Finally, on December 3rd, when 7 months had passed since Judith's disappearance, the trial began. During the first hearing, 11 people presented their testimony, including the victim's siblings. It emerged that 3 hearings and the appearance of 42 witnesses were scheduled, including forensic experts and investigators. The prosecution would be led by the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Gender Violence. Meanwhile, the private prosecution representing Judith's family would be carried out by the Provincial Council of Women, whose intervention was valued by civil organizations as an institutional step forward in the face of the escalation of femicides in the province. Both the prosecution and the private prosecution announced that they would request the maximum penalty, that is, life imprisonment, while the defense would try to dismantle the criminal charge against their client. In statements to the media, Evangelina said she wanted justice for her daughter and for the killer because of the great harm he had caused them. She stated that the whole family was destroyed because their little girl had been taken from them. Meanwhile, the teenager's aunt stressed that they would ask for the maximum penalty without any privileges, as they wanted justice to be served not only for her niece but for all victims of femicide. In the midst of the judicial process, on December 9th, a new tragedy added another layer of drama to the case when Adrian's sister ended her life, possibly overwhelmed by the media attention the case brought upon the family. Some versions even pointed to it being a consequence of harassment related to the crime and the criminal proceedings against her relative. Just 2 days later, on December 11th, 2025, the third day of the trial was held, with testimonies from forensic experts, psychologists, and psychiatrists who analyzed the crime scene, and Adrian's confession. Uyarlav kimbiki e simple zierekarizald un samarigun akinoziante de kupsam delikika lezirecheni, ziera de alna del mun sekius dalike finaldentik de mia tonavante ventes hara del mun stantikios tobovin toltakumet. The representative of the prosecutor's office pointed out that Judith was a 15-year-old girl who was always trapped, without knowing it, in a situation of gender violence. Adrian met her when she was 14, and he was 24. For several months, they maintained a dating relationship in secret until October 2024, when she decided to end it. The accused could not stand her deciding to end a toxic relationship, where he exercised an unequal power dynamic, which was seen in the scenes of jealousy and psychological violence, exercised by a person 10 years older than his victim. According to the prosecutor, it had been duly proven that Adrian, at 25, found pleasure in maintaining romantic relationships only with teenagers, as none of his girlfriends were older than 16. Furthermore, according to the prosecution's psychological reports, his behavior was typical of an infantile person with antisocial, aggressive, violent, insecure, egocentric, and narcissistic disorder. And that is why he was not attracted to people his own age, because he would not be able to play the dominant role in the relationship. Following this process, Adrian, 26 years old at the time, was declared criminally responsible for the crime of doubly aggravated homicide, for having maintained a relationship and for involving gender violence. A classification that, according to some sources, in Argentine law is equivalent to intimate femicide. In the hearing, contextual testimonies about the prior relationship and the victim's vulnerability were incorporated, as well as expert reports that proved the mechanics of strangulation and the concealment of the body. Finally, on December 22, 2025, the court handed down the sentence and imposed the penalty of life imprisonment on Adrian Oscar Ochoa as the criminally responsible author of that aggravated crime. The ruling confirmed the existence of a prior relationship, the gender violence exercised, and the attack in a context of control and dominance toward a 15-year-old teenager. Based on the investigations, it was concluded that what happened that day was the following. On May 3rd, Adrian met up with Judith, who left her house shortly before 4 in the afternoon. The teenager left with him on a motorcycle, and he drove her to the lonely spot where 2 days later the body was found. Once at the place, they supposedly had intimate relations, initially consensual. After that, presumably due to Judith's refusal to resume the relationship, they had an argument that turned into violence. Adrian physically assaulted her, causing bruises and injuries. She defended herself by hitting and scratching him, but he put his hands around her neck and squeezed until she suffocated. To hide the body, he covered it with dirt and local vegetation, subsequently fleeing. Finding himself cornered, the subject tried to evade justice by attempting to take his own life. He ingested a toxic substance, but managed to survive, after which he broke down and ended up confessing everything, so he was finally tried and convicted. For the prosecutor, the sentence was positive, as it reaffirmed the commitment of the public prosecutor's office to provide a response with due diligence in cases of violence against women, and especially in the most serious ones, where their lives are threatened. She recalled that during 4 months they managed to gather abundant evidence, including testimonies from Judith's entire inner circle, which allowed them to know that Adrian took advantage of the sociocultural vulnerability in which the young girl was immersed, to be able to manage and dominate the entire romantic relationship they had. According to the prosecutor, when she was able to understand and measure the violence and manipulation in which she was immersed, she was able to say no. But this was not accepted by the accused, who, by harassing her and through those attempts to recover the relationship and resume the bond, created what is known today as the cycle of gender violence. Likewise, she specified that scientific evidence was also collected, such as DNA and telephone records that supported the case. Who, by harassing her and through those attempts to recover the relationship and resume the bond, created what is known today as the cycle of gender violence. Likewise, she specified that scientific evidence was also collected, such as DNA and telephone records that supported the case. During the last hearing, Adrian remained silent, and after hearing his sentence, he was transferred to the prison unit where he would serve his sentence. As of the date of the investigation for this video, in February 2026, the sentence for Adrian Oscar Ochoa was handed down in the first instance by the Jujuy trial court. No records were found in public sources or news of a revocation or modification of the classification or the penalty, so the sentence remains as the current judicial ruling. Procedurally, in the Argentine system, the convicted person retains the possibility of filing appeals before higher instances, but there are no public reports that an annulment or any relevant change in the classification of femicide has occurred. The case continues to be cited by feminist organizations and gender violence observatories as one of the emblematic femicides in Jujuy in 2025. What began as a dating relationship ended up being a deadly trap. A 14-year-old teenager caught in the orbit of a man 10 years older than her who could not stand losing control. The jealousy, the constant harassment, the insistent messages, the scenes of possessiveness, these were signs that were there, ticking like a time bomb. The trigger was clear. Judith decided to end the relationship and start a new story with a boy her own age. That act of freedom, so simple and so legitimate, unleashed the fury of someone who would not accept no for an answer. The age difference was not just a number. It was an inequality of power that ended in tragedy. This case leaves a painful and urgent lesson. Harassment is never a phase. It's never intense love. It's never something that will just pass. It is a red flag. Fathers, mothers, families. Paying attention can make the difference between life and death. When there is extreme jealousy, control, threats, or obsessive insistence, it cannot be minimized. We must talk, we must support, and, if necessary, we must report. Asking the police for help at the slightest sign of harassment is not exaggerating, it is preventing. Because when violence escalates, it may already be too late. Today there is a conviction, yes, there is life imprisonment. There is an exemplary sentence. But none of that gives Judith back her dreams of being a dance teacher, her plans, her youth, her hopes. Justice can punish the person responsible, but it cannot fill the void left behind. Judith will no longer be able to dance. She won't be able to graduate. She won't be able to build the future she imagined. May her story not be just another piece of news. May it be a warning, a call to conscience, and a reminder that violence begins long before the crime, and that we must stop it before it is irreversible. And well, dear audience, that's it for another investigation. What do you think of today's case? We would really like to read your comments, as your opinion on the cases is very important to us. Remember to always do so with the utmost respect possible, both for the victim and for the other viewers and us who will be reading them. Before you go, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, don't forget to share this video if you think someone you know might be interested. See you in another criminal investigation. Goodbye.